I have said before that something I dislike more than a bad sequel, a bad remake, a bad reboot, or anything like that, the kind of thing that people tend to focus on when a franchise is expanded in a bad way. Um, Something I hate more than most of those things is when a sequel is made or some sort of continuation is made that actively ignores the legacy of the series in favor of, for example, making a sequel to the first film. We have examples of this in like the Halloween series, which has done that twice, um, with the first Halloween H2O, which was like 20 years later, and it ignores all the films except Halloween 1 and 2. And then they did Halloween last year again, which ignores all the films except the first Halloween. They did this with the Terminator twice as well. First Terminator Genesis, and then Terminator Dark Fate. Both ignore Terminator 3 and Terminator Salvation. Terminator the Sarah Connor Chronicles also did this. You have the upcoming RoboCop movie, RoboCop Returns, as it's currently called, is going to ignore all the RoboCop sequels except for the first film. The RoboCop TV miniseries did the same thing. I forget what that one was called, though. You have the upcoming Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is ignoring Ghostbusters Answer the Call, and maybe even Ghostbusters 2, it's not clear, in favor of making some sort of next generation sequel to the original Ghostbusters. It happens all the time, and I really, really hate it because I think simply erasing the legacy of something. I knew my cat would interrupt me at some point. I didn't think it would be during my opening monologue. I think ignoring the legacy of something, especially something beloved or long running, is like an insult. It shows that you don't actually have a respect for a franchise. A reboot, I can appreciate a fresh start, but to simply go, we're going to remove these sequels and do a new thing that still continues but ignores all these things, that really bothers me. And that's one of the reasons I appreciate Star Wars The Force Awakens and Star Wars The Last Jedi, because they don't, try to undo what people didn't like about the prequels, for example. Like, no, those prequels still happened. Those prequels are still canon. We still have a few references here and there to those prequels happening. They don't ignore any part of canon that people just don't happen to like. And I like that. I appreciate that. It's why I like Star Wars Rebels, which deals heavily with the fallout of the prequels. Even something like The Mandalorian clearly shows a lot of love for, the Star Wars things it's taking place after. And I love that. That's one of the things I love about Star Wars. I absolutely adore it. And Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, which was explicitly painted up as the big finale to 3 trilogies, the prequels, the original, and the sequel trilogy, clearing out all the loose threads. It had to do this. It had to properly respect the legacy and, not fuck that up. Because if you're going to be the culmination of all these things, you have to understand and respect each element of it. So, The Rise of Skywalker. I saw it over 24 hours ago. I waited with making this video because I needed to collect my thoughts and make sure I didn't forget things I wanted to talk about, so I made a list and everything. Is it the former kind of film that ignores legacy and rewrites itself to basically ignore things people maybe didn't like so much? Or is it the latter, a film that embraces its legacy, even things that maybe wasn't popular, in favor of continuing a story, or in this case, ending a story? It's the former. I absolutely hated The Rise of Skywalker. It is exactly the kind of film that I hate the most. A film that does not care for its legacy, that does not respect previous entries, and just completely destroys any semblance of like suspension of disbelief that this was actually a planned trilogy and storyline. It wasn't. There's absolutely no way. This is less of a conclusion to a planned storyline than The Dark Knight Rises was. This is less of a conclusion than Spectre, the James Bond film, was. Both of those films try to be like, oh, this is the conclusion of all the previous films. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, except Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, good films, were not meant to be part of a trilogy. Then suddenly, Dark Knight Rises had to somehow weave those two films into each other and be a conclusion, and that made that film awful. Spectre decided that Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall all had to somehow be part of this grand scheme that culminates in Spectre. As a result, it's awful and makes the previous films more just convoluted and messy as a result in retrospect. So that's also what The Rise of Skywalker is. So on top of being this needless like erosion of legacy, it is also forcing itself to conclude threads that clearly were not meant to be threaded this way. Anyway, as I said, I do have a numbered list that I'm going to go through, which goes over my key points I want to talk about. There are 8 points. The exact same number as how many Star Wars films actually tell a cohesive story. Number 1. There are no plot threads in The Rise of Skywalker, there's only plot contrivances. Now this is in part because this film is incredibly rushed. It's just like scene after scene, nothing can take time to like to set in, or there's no building on anything. It's just new thing is introduced, which leads to the next thing. It's mainly a series of like fetch quests for these random MacGuffins. Primarily, for the longest part, the Sith Wayfinder, which is what they're looking for. Like they have to find this. They have to get to a planet. To get to that planet, they have to first they have to learn of the planet, which they learn of through getting a spy message, and then they have to figure out how to get to the planet. And to do that, they have to get a Wayfinder. But to find the Wayfinder, they have to get the dagger. But to get the dagger, they have to first follow the thread in the notes that Luke left in a book, and those, which apparently is, one of the books in the library on the island that were, the sacred Jedi's texts, the earliest writing. Now one of those is apparently just Luke's notebook. Okay. So it's like just this like odd fetch quests of event where it's like, you need to fix this thing so you can fix this thing, so you can fix this thing so you can fix this thing. And like half of it could have been cut. Would have allowed for more time for things to actually develop and for characters to, talk and do things. But instead, they're always rushing into the next scene. And as a result, the scenes don't feel connected. This even includes the action scenes. Like, they make use of the magical bond that Kylo and Rey has to basically justify not having to write in a logical pattern for them to find each other or interact. So, you know how in Last Jedi they had those moments where Kylo and Ren, it's just Ren for short, Ren and Rey would like touch hands and stuff, and they would see each other and where they were, and it was like strange, and we hadn't seen this before with the Force. It was really cool. Now they do it all the time. They even fight with... The cats are also fighting. They even fight in this mode where they're like in 2 different locations. They're constantly pulling items out of each other's locations and it's how they figure out where to go and what they're doing. They just always somehow happen to like pull out something from the other one's location. It's like, ah, that's where they are. And it's ridiculous. I'm pretty sure at one point, and I could be wrong because I'm not entirely sure how Kylo Ren got to the location he was at, but if I understood correctly, at one point Rey sort of pulls Kylo Ren into where she is, and it's like, so he's just there now. Like maybe it was just like the scene got cut or something, and he actually did like walk to the place she was at, but we never saw that. So just like suddenly he is there, and it's like, okay, that's strange. But that just means that like none of the scenes actually like feel like they connect, because they just like do a snap of their fingers, and now these characters can fight or interact or whatever, and there didn't need to be any like logical progression there. The same thing goes for... Why can't you go to sleep? It's the middle of the night. There's just like... And speaking of contrivances, like, so, you know, one of the big things was, is Kylo Ren going to be redeemed or not? And, I mean, if it wasn't clear, by the way, this is all spoilers all out. I haven't really mentioned any specific plot reveals yet, but here you go. Yes, spoilers are coming. Yes, Kylo Ren is redeemed. But the way he is redeemed has no build-up. No, it's in the middle of a fight with Rey, and then Leia reaches out to Ren and dies while doing so, and that makes Kylo Ren be like, oh no, my mom died. And then Rey stabs him and kills Ren, but not Ben Solo, and he's good now. That's how it happens. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And like, controversies continue as well. Like, they're playing with a box. Amazing. The contrivances continue because, like, you know how they needed to find this Wayfinder and this dagger to find the Wayfinder? Well, okay, so they lose the dagger, but it's okay because C-3PO has memorized the writing. But he can't translate it, so they need to override his like memory to read it. But then they get the dagger back anyway. So it's like, okay, what was the point of losing the dagger? And it turns out they actually need the dagger anyway after they've translated it. So like, the whole point of the dagger being stolen, and they're like, but we still have the message. That's just pointless. Actually ties into a later detail, but whatever. But then like, the Wayfinder gets destroyed. And there is another Wayfinder, but most of the main characters don't have that one. And they're like, oh no, how will we ever find this planet? And then, like, there's just a scene where Poe is like, hey, droid, maybe it was Finn, actually, I'm not sure. Like, hey, droid, what's your name? And the droid's like, oh, I'm Dio. And then they cut to, like, I checked Dio's memory banks, and it turns out he was going to the planet we're going to. So he can take us there and knows a bunch of stuff. And it's like, really? So, you realize how much time we wasted when we could have just asked Dio, the little robot, to help us? And then like contrivances continue. The final battle, like, they're like, oh no, it's like the biggest fleet in the history of the stars, of the wars, of all these Star Destroyers who are all more powerful than ever, and we can't ever possibly win against these. And they're like, we will send out a call for hope, and like people will hear us and come help us. You know, that thing they did at the end of the last film that didn't work because no one responded. They even pointed out. Now, in this film, everyone comes in, and they get an equally massive fleet, like the size of like a fucking like 50 nations worthwhile of like military forces in like, no time at all. It's not explained why they answered this time, it's just they did, because it's the final film and they needed to win the last battle. uh, like, it's so frustrating. Like, there always happens to be, like, some simple way out. Like, another comparison, like, they get stuck in this quicksand. They call it something else because it's like this gray, rocky version of a quicksand. And it turns out it's like it leads to this den where a snake lives and whatever. And like they find a dead body there. The dead body happens to have the dagger they were looking for, and that's great. Good thing you got stuck in the quicksand, and then they just sort of like befriend the snake, heals his wounds, and the snake is like, "Here's the exit," and they can just walk out. It's ridiculous. Okay, point 2. References take the place of original storytelling. Like, this film is so full of references, and people say this about The Force Awakens, but The Force Awakens felt like an homage to Star Wars as a whole. This is just references. Like, okay, Palpatine is back. What was the point of bringing back Palpatine, you ask? Well, he was the villain of the original trilogy. That's basically it. Like, there's no real reason why Palpatine is back. There's no real explanation why Palpatine would be back or how he would be the one behind everything. Like, he is this. Like, it's the first scene of the film. Actually, it's in the opening crawl text. They're just like, Emperor Palpatine's voice has echoed through the galaxy. And then the next scene is like Kylo Ren finding Palpatine's like, "You're dead." And Palpatine's like, "Guess I'm not." It's like, oh, well then, like, oh, that sucks. And he's like, "Also, I was behind the last 2 films." And it's like, okay. Anyway, that's it. So, like, that's just there because he was the original trilogy villain. It's the only reason he's there. He has the final order, which is going to, like, replace the First Order. That's just a new galactic empire. He even refers to it as the new empire, and he's going to be the emperor of the new empire. And because, you know, we gotta make it more like the original trilogy. They have, like, this mass fleet of Death Stars. Star Destroyers, but every single Star Destroyer is now a Death Star, has a Death Star cannon that you can just instantly blow up a planet. Which, you know, didn't you require, like, a fuck ton of Kyber crystals for that? How did you get Kyber crystals for that? While being a dead, half-living, kind of mutant, maybe cloned cyborg person? Maybe? I'm not sure. I don't know what Palpatine is in this film. But no, every single Star Destroyer has a Death Star beam now and can just, like, destroy an entire planet, because the Death Star was in the original trilogy, so we need that one in this one as well. There's a scene where Rey goes into a den of the dark side and faces an evil version of herself. That's the red-sabered one from the trailer. Because, you know, that happened in Empire Strikes Back when Luke walked into the den of the dark side and fought Vader, except Vader was himself. Like, it's just scene for scene, it's something referencing the original. And this is fine to a degree. Like, the end of the film has a Tatooine shot, and it's specifically, like, you know, echoing the beginning of A New Hope or the end of Revenge of the Sith. I'm okay with that. Like, yes, that feels conclusive and good. And if that was, like, one of the few references or the only reference, then great, you know, fine. But every scene is like that. They throw in references to fucking everything. Like, but only the original trilogy. Only the original trilogy. They even reference the Ewoks, but only the original trilogy. Like, we gotta see Bespin. We gotta see Endor. We gotta go to Endor and find the Death Star. Because the Death Star is apparently really important now. And there's, like, secrets on the Death Star. And, of course, Palpatine's back. And we gotta go to Tatooine with Luke's lightsaber at the end. Luke's lightsaber is important as well, because Luke had it, even though he lost it. So I'm not sure why Luke's lightsaber is so fucking important. And they only call it Luke's lightsaber. They never say it's Anakin's lightsaber. Even though it was Anakin's lightsaber first, and, you know, this is supposed to be a conclusion to the entire trilogy. The entire 3 trilogies, not just the original trilogy. But, you know, No one ever acknowledges that. I'm not sure if Anakin is ever named in the film. Palpatine is always called Palpatine, always called Emperor Palpatine, never called Sidious, never called Darth Sidious, even though that would reasonably be what he's going by. Like, Emperor Palpatine was his formal title and name, but as a Sith Lord, which he is, to make sure to make it clear this is about the Sith, this is about the return of the Sith. Even say the return of the Sith at one point, which I'm guessing was like an allusion to, you know, how Return of the Jedi was called Revenge of the Jedi, and then we got Revenge of the Sith. So they were like Return of the Sith, which would have been a better title than The Rise of Skywalker, but it wouldn't have been very conclusive, I guess. But like, why isn't he called Darth Sidious? Why is no one calling him Darth Sidious? Luke called him Darth Sidious in... Seriously, Cat? Luke called him Darth Sidious in the last film. Because, you know, that's what he goes by. But no, he goes by Palpatine now. Luke appears as a Force Ghost again and still just like, oh yeah, Palpatine. So apparently it's just like Palpatine now. We're not gonna, we can't acknowledge the prequels. People don't like those. It's like, frustrates me so much. And of course, we also have, like, you know, a reference to the chess on, like the holo chess on the Millennium Falcon, because that's apparently the only game people ever play in Star Wars, the holo chess on the Millennium Falcon, which for somehow has never been replaced by anyone who's ever owned the Falcon in the past, you know, in-universe 50 years or whatever. Lando's in the film, but he's not. That doesn't really mean much. He doesn't really do much. Like, his only like plot relevant thing is that he helps gather the fleet at the end, which he does with Chewbacca. And I guess it's because Chewbacca doesn't speak Basic, so I guess he was needed for that. But it's like, I was excited to see Lando. I like Lando, and he just doesn't do anything. He's just there because he was in the original trilogy. They bring back General Pride from the original trilogy, who's apparently now still a loyal Emperor Palpatine follower. So, you know, okay. God. Alright, number 3. Much of this film is pointless. So, like, they brought back the Knights of Ren, because everyone was like, what are the Knights of Ren? Is it the people Rey saw in that flashback in The Force Awakens? It turns out it is. They're all the Knights of Ren. They're Kylo Ren's loyal followers who look up to him. What do they do in this film? They don't really do anything. They follow Rey around because they're supposed to be hunting Rey down, but they never succeed in getting to. I don't think Rey ever fights any one of them. And then in the final part of the film, Kylo Ren fights them and kills them. Or rather, Ben Solo fights them and kills them. So, you know, sure glad we brought back the Knights of Ren. You know, that's good. We established that like the Sith are back. The Sith we have all these Sith followers on Exegol, the legendary Sith planet, and they're all followers of Palpatine, and it's like they don't do anything. They're just there. How is like this cult of like a thousand Sith? How have they just gone completely unnoticed? Remember how hard it was for you know, yes, I can buy that the Jedi Order didn't discover that there were 2 Sith around still, but thousands of Siths making a secret fleet? What? Why? And then again, they don't do anything. They just don't do anything. I guess the only Sith followers that do something are the Sith troopers, which are stormtroopers, except they believe in the Sith religion and they have a red armor. Now you might be wondering, do they act or behave anything differently from a stormtrooper? Can they do something stormtroopers can't do? No, they're just stormtroopers. They're stormtroopers, but they're red. That's it. Like, they don't have any powers, they're not force trained, they're just red stormtroopers. They hype these up for some reason. Completely pointless. I already mentioned how, like, they keep losing the MacGuffins and yet just it doesn't matter because they had another backup. So it's like, that's pointless. The reveal to start, oh, there's a spy in the First Order, and like your instant reaction is like, oh, who could that be? And then like the first scene on the First Order command ship, you see that Hux is still like very, very uncomfortable with Kylo Ren being in charge. They're like, oh, Hux is the spy. And then they get to the part where Hux is like, I am the spy. And you're like, cool, okay, this is interesting, because he was such a despicable, over-the-top character. Him being the spy, him defecting to the good side, to the resistance, that could do so much for the story. That could make something really interesting, because like you never expected him to change sides just because he doesn't like Kylo Ren and wants to infuriate him. At which I turned to my friend and said, well-behaved bottoms never made history. And then he's killed. Like, the very next scene he's killed. And the things he did as the spy was like, he releases the good guys from being held at gunpoint at one point, and apparently smuggle information that the Emperor was back, which people already knew, so that was pointless. Also, the whole thing was just ripped straight out of Star Wars Rebels, where oh god, what's the officer in Rebels? There's an officer in Rebels who's like an Imperial officer who does the same thing, where like he's the villain throughout a long while, and then it's revealed that he's actually a rebel spy, and like that's a really good twist, and I wanted to do stuff with that. But here they just kill Hux. I guess they needed Hux to die somehow, and they didn't want him to die at the hands of his lover Kylo Ren, so they just had General Pride shoot him. Okay. And like I already mentioned, like how Lando doesn't do anything. So much of this film is pointless. They go to this big festival, and like this build up like this really cool like how these people celebrate something every 42 years, and I guess they kind of do something with that because it's how Kylo Ren finds out where Rey is, but it's like they go to a planet, they set up something cool about it, and then they don't really do anything with it. And that's what they do with each planet they go to. They go to a lot of planets in this one. I'm astounded at how much it just like, oh yeah, so like, you know how they replaced Rose on the poster with this slug alien? Well, the slug alien is pointless. I think he's in like 2 scenes total. So, you know, good job catering to those who harassed Kelly Marie Tran there. So, at one point C-3PO gets like a mind wiped, but that's also pointless because R2 just has a backup anyway, so it's like, it makes for some funny jokes though. I will admit that. Jokes were funny. Number 4, and this is a big one. Race heritage and the way the movie is confused about it. So they were in a bit of a tight spot. The Last Jedi said that race parents were nobodies, they sold her off for drinking money, and they're buried in the desert. Now, this pissed people off because apparently bloodlines are super important, and she needed to be a descendant of an existing character. Well, what they do in order to try and please them without literally just retconning The Last Jedi out of continuity is by having it revealed that her parents decided to be nobodies and decided to sell her off to protect her, and then they were killed and buried in the desert. And it was all an act because they were on the run from someone else. And her parents, they're not named, and they're not people we already knew, so in that regard, yay, I guess Rey actually isn't the child of some existing character. But she is the grandchild of an existing character, because she's Palpatine's granddaughter. And they were on the run from Palpatine, and they sold her off to Uncle Plot to hide her from Palpatine. And Palpatine wants her because the fact that she is a Palpatine, that she is Rey Palpatine, means that she has super good, awesome blood and knows all about the Force. And, you know, we get a hint for this early on in the film where she's doing like this Force pull thing, struggle with Kylo Ren. They're both trying to like, one is trying to like keep a ship in place, and Kylo Ren is trying to like let the ship fly away. And like they're getting more and more visibly like they're struggling, and suddenly Rey's Force pull turns into Force lightning. And at that point I was like, oh no, she's going to be a Palpatine, and that's why they actually brought Palpatine back. Because, you know, logically that makes no sense, because, you know, Force lightning has nothing to do with being Palpatine, but that's just a visual cue for you to understand that, yeah, she can do this because she's a Palpatine. And like, so yeah, they had to explain why she's so good with the Force. It's because she's a Palpatine. And then they set all this up. They reveal that Rey is a Palpatine. She is of the Palpatine bloodline. They make this big fuss. And then they still try to end on a point saying that bloodlines don't matter. There are things bigger than blood. And Rey adopting the name Skywalker for herself. Which would have been more effective if you didn't literally cater to fanboys who were pissed off that a random girl from a desert could be good with the Force. Why? This also makes her another chosen one, essentially, just in a different manner. Because, like, everything that's happened in the series is because Palpatine wanted his granddaughter, apparently. In the sequel trilogy, that is. Like Snoke? Snoke was actually a Palpatine, by the way. Snoke, he has several Snokes in, like, a tube. And, like, all the attempts to kill Rey were, like, I guess, actually ways to try and get Rey to do some darksiding or something. I don't know. Like, it makes no fucking sense. But yeah, Rey's a Palpatine. And that's why she's good. So people won't call her a Mary Sue anymore. Because that's how storytelling works now. But heritage doesn't matter. You can be who you need to be. As long as you are born of a powerful Force user, you can be a good Jedi. Fuck this film. Oh yeah, so point 5. This film is aggressively heterosexual. Now, ahead of release, it was revealed that no, Poe and Finn will not be a thing. And I mean, I expected as much. I mean, Disney are cowards. They were never going to do that. But, you know, Oscar Isaacs ended up actually talking about this, and he expressed real disappointment that Disney did not go through with Poe and Finn. And even John Boyega in a recent interview was like, admitted that it would have been fun to see that approached in the series. And you know, not including a relationship is fine. But instead they go out of their way to make sure that we really, really understand that these two men are into women. So Poe Dameron meets this old flame of his, some lady who he has like aggressive banter with, and it's like, can I kiss you? Like, can we get back together? He actually like literally goes, can I kiss you at one point after she's like insulted him, and it's like, ugh, it's so icky. And it's like, what's the point of that? It was just there to make sure that you knew that Poe Dameron is straight. And of course, Finn has the hots for Rey, but he can't get Rey, so they also pair him up with another new female character who's really only there so you can pair Finn up with that character. Reylo is canon. Yes, they went through with it, which is pretty gross considering that Rey considers Leia basically her mom, and she adopts the Skywalker name in honor of Leia and Luke for being parental figures to her at the end of the film. But you know, yeah. I mean, it turns out even Palpatine fucks. So, I mean, we don't know who Rey's grandmother was, but I mean, they did not in any way indicate that Rey was another midichlorian style thing. So that would have required actually referencing the prequels, and we can't do that. So instead, it's just that I guess Palpatine had a wife at some point. It just somehow was never mentioned, even in the prequels, when he was, supposedly a regular dude trying to at least, get around as a regular person. Like, there's even C-3PO and R2-D2 get a fucking like friend zoning moment with C-3PO. Who people tend to joke is like, oh, the first gay character in Star Wars is C-3PO because he's flamboyant. But no, even he gets a moment where he's like, R2-D2, you truly are my best friend, and it's like, what? Why would he say that? I mean, yes, great, they're best friends, but like, it was such an awkward line. But yeah, no, sorry. They're all straight. This film is so aggressively It's the most heterosexual of all the Star Wars films. Like, they just force so many just boy-girl things into this. It's ridiculous. Number 6, fake out deaths. So this film is really into like doing fake outs for some reason, despite that clearly having no indication to follow through with them. So first, Rey accidentally blows up the ship as Chewie was being taken away, and with her Force lightning, just exploding the ship, and they all think Chewie is dead. But next scene, it turns out that he's actually okay. He was on another ship, and it's like, it doesn't even take that long for them to find this out and go save him. So like, what was the point of even having them think he was dead? Like, I'm also not entirely sure how he got captured. Like, I think he was captured by the Knights of Ren, but like, it's just weirdly edited the way it happens, because he goes away to talk to Rey, then he runs into the Knights of Ren, and then he's in chains being put on a ship, and then the ship explodes, but it turns out he wasn't on that ship. And I guess none of the Knights of Ren was on that ship either, because they die later in the film. And then I mentioned C-3PO, who, like, he has this Sith message in his brain from the dagger they found, but he's not allowed to translate it because like, it goes against his programming to translate Sith. It's illegal. So they have to like do an override of his like something so he can translate it, which will cause a complete memory reset. So they wipe his mind, and it's this somber moment where like he's like, I'm taking one last good look at my friends. Goodbye. And like, they wipe it, and then they joke around with him not knowing what's going on, and then they just restore the memory in a way. So again, what was the point of that? I already mentioned earlier, but like, still, it's just that is basically a character death that's then undone. Kylo Ren gets stabbed, as I mentioned, which means that he dies, except Rey uses her own life force and transfers it to Kylo Ren to heal his wound so he's okay. Then he gets thrown into a pit to die by Palpatine. Then he comes back out alive so that he can sacrifice himself by taking his life force and giving it to Rey, and then they kiss, and then he dies. So like, you did 2 fake out deaths, and then he sacrifices himself. You could have just had 1 death. Well, like, it's just so, like, this movie is so strangely written, because it's so clearly written to, like, try and appease every single thing people complains about without taking into account, like, how that will affect a film thematically, or in terms of pacing, or if it will fit into anything. Yeah, 7. This is a big one. The absolute distaste for the Star Wars legacy. This is what I was talking about at the very start of this video. So, first off, They did bring back Palpatine, but his original plan is completely ignored. Darth Sidious's original plan is completely ignored. Now, as you might know, Darth Sidious, who was the apprentice of Darth Plagueis, they created life from the midichlorians, Anakin Skywalker, to try and create the ultimate, strongest being of the Force, to basically make the strongest Sith ever. And of course, there's a rule of two, and the intent is always to try and breed forward a stronger and stronger individual. So, logically, Palpatine would want, the offspring of Skywalker, which is what he's wanted before. But no, he wants his own offspring. And there's no mention of, how Anakin was powerful, and therefore Luke was powerful, and therefore Ben is powerful. No, it's all. Instead, they've just reset Palpatine to what it was like in Episode 6. And by that I mean that, not Episode 6 when you know the context of the prequels, I mean Episode 6 before the prequels released. So he's just random bad guy whose approach to converting Rey to the dark side is saying, please join the dark side. Come on, over and over. There's no seducing going on, there's no actual planning or plotting going on. He had this big 4D chess thing going on in the prequels that people make fun of, but at least it was a plan. He didn't have a plan here. He's just the bad guy. That's it. You know how Yoda is death is a part of life in the prequels, and how that's an important thing, is to respect that people will die? Well, this film doesn't respect death at all. Because, you have Rey. Rey uses her life transfer power to save people about to die, and is saved that way at the end as well. And it's if that's cool to do, then I feel like a lot of deaths in Star Wars wouldn't have happened. Now, I'm not saying that healing via the Force is a bad thing, but the way they use it in this, and how, apart from the last time they use it, how it costs them absolute nothing, just makes the sacrifices in previous Star Wars films look incompetent. Why did Obi-Wan just life force Qui-Gon back to life? Yeah, he got stabbed with a lightsaber, but so did Kylo Ren, and that was good enough. Why didn't Luke do that to Darth Vader at the end? What's the point? Luke's lightsaber, the one that broke in The Last Jedi, it's back and it's whole. And you might be. We saw this in the trailers, and I assumed that we would maybe get a scene where Rey puts it back together. She remolds, recreates that lightsaber, and now it's her lightsaber. Nope, it's just back together. They never even reference it. It's just back together. No explanation. So, great. Rose Tico, who was a main character in Last Jedi, she is barely even a minuscule character in this film. She has maybe 4 lines, and she doesn't do much of anything. They're he's oh, I'm sorry, I can't come with you on this adventure because I have to study Star Destroyers. And it's okay. And then at the end of the film, she's oh, I'm in the battle too, and she shoots a blaster or two, and that's about it. So, again, complete middle finger to how big and important she was in The Last Jedi, and catering to people who harassed her off social media, so that sucks. They do a bunch of pointless cameos of pretty much everything except characters that were introduced in the prequels or The Last Jedi. And planets, for that matter. I already mentioned planets. So, Han Solo comes back. Yes. Now, as part of Ben Solo's memory, and it's after he's turned to the good side. He talks with his father again, and he has the same conversation he had in The Force Awakens. And then but instead of stabbing his memory father, he throws his lightsaber into the sea. Which, okay, but yeah, Han Solo is there. Luke is there, of course. Luke is there as a Force ghost, and it's basically there to be like, "Hi, I'm going to say things that people wanted me to say in the last film now, and that's about it." I mentioned how how like uh, sorry, words are failing me right now. Lando is basically just a glorified cameo. But like you might be thinking that, oh, so we're doing a Force Ghost thing where like these classic Jedi come back. So maybe we would have like Obi-Wan. Maybe Ewan McGregor will step in as Obi-Wan, or maybe we would even get Anakin Skywalker for like a final shot of all the heroes, like in Return of the Jedi. No, it's just Luke and Leia. Because I guess if they did the others, they would have to get Ewan McGregor or Hayden Christensen, and that would reference the prequels, so we can't do that because gotta pretend they don't exist. So, yay. I think Obi-Wan and maybe Anakin's voices appear at one point, but because Rey is like, every Jedi lives in me now, which, having that kind of thing, because like you have Palpatine's like, I am every Sith ever lived, and then Rey's like, but I am every Jedi who ever lived, and then she like melts his face off literally, and that's all well and good, except that this film has made no effort to acknowledge any Jedi that were created after 1983. So that sucks. Even like goes against The Force Awakens. It couldn't even respect it couldn't even respect the legacy of the previous film the same director did. Because when The Force Awakens came out, a big part of the reason people were hyping up the First Order, Kylo Ren, and Supreme Leader Snoke, and this was done by Disney and by the people involved with the film, they hyped up the fact that they were not Sith. They were not Sith. They were not simply the Sith again. They were not Sith or the Empire again. These were going to be a new dark side element, and that's what made them interesting. It's why people wondered, like, oh, but who is Snoke? Why is Snoke? Like, what's the difference between Snoke and the Sith? And like, is that why Kylo Ren isn't called like Darth Ren? Like, but it turns out they're all just Sith. They're just Sith. Like they were, because Snoke was just Palpatine in a puppet. Kylo Ren is just another Sith Lord, because he falls under the same rule of two bullshit that the Sith always do. So, because the other Knights of Ren aren't even Sith Lords, at least they don't use lightsabers, which, I guess you don't have to use lightsabers to be a Sith Lord, but it's kind of, visual indication would be that they have lightsabers, but no. So it's literally just the same old Sith bullshit again. The thing that we were promised it wasn't when The Force Awakens came out. 4 years ago. Just 4 years ago. Poe Dameron was demoted in the last movie from commander to captain because he disobeyed orders and caused a bunch of deaths. So naturally in this film, he is so highly ranked that when Leia dies, he becomes acting general in her place. I actually wonder if I had seen The Rise of Skywalker without rewatching the other 10 films ahead of it, do you think I would have liked it more? Because what really bugs me is I have all the Star Wars films fresh in memory now, and The Rise of Skywalker hates most of them. just... I consider myself easy to please when it comes to Star Wars. I'm the one who will say that half of Attack of the Clones is good. I love The Force Awakens, so I have no issue with J.J. Abrams' fan service approach to storytelling. I like Star Trek 09 as well. Didn't like Into Darkness, but that's a whole other discussion. And he was producer on Star Trek Beyond as well, which I adored. So, you know, got no problems with J.J. Abrams. I was certain I would like this film, because I figured all it has to do is show that it cares about the Star Wars legacy while entertaining me, and I will be happy with it. I might have complaints, yes, but I will be happy with it. Instead, it did the opposite, and okay. Final point. 8. Things that I did like about the film. So I already mentioned that at the end, Rey goes to Tatooine, specifically to the moisture farm where Luke grew up, which somehow is intact. I mean, I sort of assumed that place would have been destroyed by now, but I guess they just cleaned up the bodies and stopped the fire, and then no one ever moved in there. But she goes there, and she buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the ground, and then she walks out of there, and she meets a lady who's like, "Oh, people don't come around here anymore. Who are you?" And she's like, "Rey." And she's like, "Rey who?" Which, by the way, let's take that later. "Rey who?" And she's like, "Rey." And she looks away, and she sees Luke and Leia like nod their heads, and she says, "Rey Skywalker." I like that. That is great. I love the idea of her basically becoming an adopted Skywalker with the approval of Luke and Leia. Like that's great. That is really good. And I would have loved, I really did love that ending, and I wish it was attached to a film I liked more. I also mentioned Leia's lightsaber. We see Leia training. They do CGI to make young Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher is in this movie much more than I thought, by the way, which is another positive, but also kind of a negative, but we'll get there. But they show Leia's training, and I guess this is because people are like, since when does Leia know the Force? I mean, she always did, but I don't mind them adding that because it was just really cool seeing her like have a lightsaber and training and be like, yeah, of course I trained in between the films after finding out I was a Skywalker. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And I like that she has her own lightsaber. Don't like that it's blue. I'm so tired of blue lightsabers. Speaking of, at the end of the film, when she's buried the blue lightsabers, Luke and Leia's lightsabers, we see that she has gotten her own lightsaber now, which looks to be a double-bladed lightsaber, but she only uses one side for this shot, but she ignites it and it's yellow. So Rey has a yellow lightsaber now, and that makes me happy because I'm so tired of only blue and red appearing all the time, and having a main character have another color is really nice, but the movies are over, so, you know. The jokes are really good. The movie is really funny. Like, the jokes do land. C-3PO is the funniest he's ever been. Like, they've perfected the comedic timing of his inserts and everything. The new droid, Dio, is adorable. I love it. I will probably buy a plush of it or something. Like, absolutely delightful droid. The performances are great, of course. Let's talk about Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher's in this film for much more than I thought. She actually has quite a lot of scenes. She's noticeably awkwardly stiff in most of them, which makes sense because And by stiff, I mean like she's just standing still for most of them, which makes sense because she's dead and they're using, insert actor CGI and repurposed footage to put her into the film. Now, I talked about this during my Rogue One rant. I think it's fine that they had Carrie Fisher in this film because she was actively playing Leia when she died, and she likely would have wanted to play Leia in this film as well. She was looking forward to it, even. She had said as much. And it was said that this was going to be like the one that focused on Leia more. I don't know how true that is because this trilogy clearly wasn't planned. But I can buy that would have been the case, and she does get a lot of screen time here, and I do appreciate that. At the same time, I have very conflicted feelings on her actually dying in this film. Just because of the fact that she died, in real life in between, before the release of The Last Jedi. And it's like, I get why it's thematically proper, but I feel like putting us through seeing Princess Leia or General Leia dying. They call her Princess a lot, by the way, because, original trilogy. It almost felt like it was trying to manipulate us into feeling sad that Carrie Fisher passed, and therefore feel like the movie earned points for being emotional. And it was kind of awkward. It was very awkward. But still, like, I still loved seeing her there one last time. And I wish she could have been there, as an actress, and that she hadn't passed on. Maybe the script would have been better because she was always rewriting the screenplays that she was on to fix them up. And this is the first time she couldn't do that. Oh well. Other things I like. The action scenes are good. The non-action scenes are strange and shot like in way too much close-ups. In particular, the early stuff, like when we first meet Palpatine, for example, I could barely follow what was going on because it was just full of like flashing light and like zoomed in faces, and I was like, this is just annoying to look at. But like the action scenes are really good. The choreography is really good. There's probably too many action scenes, but again, that's design. This film is designed by committee. That's what I'm going to talk about in my closing thing on this. But yeah, I liked the. I liked that they found this like, basically this like enclave of former stormtroopers who deserted on Endor. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, I think that's like the stuff I did like, basically. I wish I would have liked the Dark Ray thing, but it's like 10 seconds long, and it's not even a thing that actually happens. It's just her fighting her own mind, and pointless. I do like the sign of Exegol and the Sith Throne, which is originally from Return of the Jedi's concept art. I actually like that Kylo Ren has his helmet reforged, but with like visible cracks. I think that's thematically proper. People use that as an example of how it erases The Last Jedi, but I do like it. I think it builds on The Last Jedi, because in The Last Jedi, he breaks it in frustration, and then now he's trying to hide the fact that he's broken, so he's put it back together, but it's still visibly broken because all the pieces can still be seen with this red thing. Like, I thought that was great. I thought that was really good, actually. I thought that was a very good choice. That's probably the stuff that I like. Oh yeah, there's another scene. Let's talk about the whole Rey, the surname thing. So when I talked about Solo, I said it was ridiculous that the Empire dude was like, Han who? What are your people? And Han is like, no one. I don't have any people. I'm alone. And then he's like, oh, Han Solo, because people in Star Wars not having surnames has always been a thing. No one asks Yoda what his surname is, you know. So the fact that this film does it twice to Rey was just embarrassing. Like, first they're at this festival, and C-3PO is translating for this girl who's like, oh, this girl's name is something something something, and Rey's like, oh, hello, I'm Rey, and then the girl says something, and C-3PO's like, the girl would also like to know what your surname is. She's like, I don't have one, and it's like, and then at the end again, it's like, Rey who, and it's like, people don't talk this way. Especially not in Star Wars. That makes no sense. And like, I would have been fine with it at the end if that was the only time because of the Skywalker reveal. Or maybe even if they haven't had the whole Palpatine thing, it would have all been fine because of the Skywalker reveal at the end. Because the Rise of Skywalker meaning both, you know, Ben Solo turning good and Rey becoming a Skywalker. Like adopting the name. I like those things. I think that's good. But the Palpatine thing just ruins it so much. Oh yeah, I also want to mention, I forgot this earlier when I talked about the Sith. So, to find Exegol, the legendary planet of the Sith, you need to find the Sith Wayfinders, of which there were only 2 made. Now, Kylo Ren has one, but there's one left. And to find this one, they have to track down an old Jedi Hunter ship that Luke had followed to try and find this Wayfinder. Okay. And doing so, they find this dagger. And this dagger has a specific Sith inscription on it. And like, you can take out a little arrow on it. And it turns out that what you need to do is you need to know this inscription, which is basically like the point will be the location 2 were made or something. Like, there's some random puzzle speak. And this, you're supposed to use this dagger, stand on the shoreline where the Death Star landed, look at the broken Death Star 2, and match the dagger to how it's broken, and then take out this arrow, and that's where the Wayfinder is. Meaning that all of this was done in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And why would you go to the destroyed Death Star to hide an item on it and then make a dagger to find the item? Like, I assume when they found the dagger it would be like some ancient Sith legend, but no, it's like this dagger was apparently made like 20 years ago or something, and that was just awkward. I wish they would have just cut the Wayfinder bit entirely and the dagger, and that they would have gone to Death Star specifically because the Emperor was there. Maybe they could find a hint to where the Emperor is from being there, and then they happen to find the Wayfinder just by happenstance. That would have made more sense. Or the whole Dio thing where Dio's like, oh, Dio knows where the planet is, so no. Oh yeah, by the way, I almost forgot. References. Naturally, Rey's new ship is Luke's original X-Wing, which Luke takes out of the water on the planet he was at in The Last Jedi, because she goes there to, like, destroy things. She even throws his lightsaber into the fire, and then Luke catches the lightsaber as a ghost. I'm guessing that was to make up for people who were pissed that Luke threw away his lightsaber in The Last Jedi. And there are no porgs, somehow, on this island now. I don't like this film. Okay, let's just get this over with. So, those are my points, and I'm not going to try and conclude my thoughts on this. It is clear to me that this was not a planned trilogy. I don't think, regardless if J.J. Abrams had come back or if we would have gotten Colin Trevorrow on this, I don't think it would have mattered. It would have been the same mess anyway. I think even if Abrams was on all three films, or if Johnson was on the third film, it would have still been the same mess. Because to me, what is clearly obvious is that this is a film designed by committee at Disney, based on Disney's own insecurities. They saw people loudly angry, so they catered to all the angry fans. It's much easier to be heard and seen if you're angry and upset than it is if you're happy and content with what you get, which means it's the angry fans that people cater to. Even if most fans were happy with something, the angry fans will be noticed, and that's unfortunate, and that's why you have to be very careful about when you listen to feedback to understand what feedback actually reflects, things worth listening to and what doesn't. And this one instead just tries to please everyone by catering to every complaint there was about Star Wars, and as a result becomes a complete mess that just shits on the franchise. Star Wars The Force Awakens was a fairly safe film that served as an homage to the entire franchise of Star Wars. Specifically, it was made to show that yes, at Disney, Star Wars will still feel like Star Wars. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is a film that instead proves that under Disney, Star Wars is still insecure about needing to feel like Star Wars 4 years later. And if this continues, then we won't ever have a proper, creative, interesting story in Star Wars again, because they're that afraid of any kind of backlash. And I think even The Last Jedi turned out the way it did because of backlash. Because people complained that The Force Awakens was too safe and too much like the original A New Hope. So they were like, okay, Johnson, go ahead, show us how different you can make Last Jedi. And then they heard complaints that The Last Jedi was too different, so they were like, quick, go back. Let's pull it back into the safe zone, into the not safe zone, what's the actual word? Well, let's just go with safe zone. That's not what I was going to say, but it's yeah. Comfort zone, that was the word I was actually looking for. It's just a complete mess. All I can hope is the fact that this film is not doing better tickets-wise so far than The Last Jedi is. It's doing on par with it, but it's reviewing terribly compared to previous Star Wars films. I'm hoping that shows to Disney, first, that it doesn't really matter, if you try and cater to angry fans or not, people will still come to watch Star Wars. The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker having about the same ticket sales shows that it was never going to change no matter what you did in terms of how you present the previous film in regards to the new film. And I hope that the low reviews mixed in with that shows Disney and tells Disney that please don't homogenize this thing into just references and contrivances to try and please as many fans as possible, even if their complaints make no sense at all. Or if they're bad faith complaints like, we don't like that an Asian woman is in this film, so they just write her into barely being in the film. Oh yeah, there were two girls and they kiss for 2 seconds. They don't have names and they don't say anything, but that was the LGBT rep that we were promised we would get in The Rise of Skywalker. 2 seconds. That can be easily cut out.